Hey guys, how's it going? Board now, back with you for another TV review, and on this video I will be reviewing the latest episode of Dracula, the new BBC Netflix co-production, which is airing on 3 back-to-back nights this week. So this is obviously part 2, and it goes up on Netflix at the weekend. And this episode is called Blood Vessel, the second episode. And as you know, those of you who saw my review of the first episode, I really wasn't too keen on it. It had a lot of problems. And this episode, I guess not surprisingly in a way, didn't really do anything to solve those problems. If anything, I thought this episode was even worse. I think just because it was more boring and just dragged more, and there was never really anything to really get me excited about it. Whereas I think the first episode, although it failed, I think it at least had its moments. So this second part covers the famous part in the novel and in like the original film with Bela Lugosi, where it's all set on the ship, and so Dracula is being transported on this ship, and he's obviously gone undercover, and he's ends up preying on all these different like passengers. So it becomes like this slasher type thing where he's running through these different characters, but he's manipulating them. He's obviously using his magic and his mind games, and you get kind of a murder mystery sort of vibe about it at some point, where they obviously find out that people are being killed, and they narrow it down to then it's someone on the ship, so it has to be one of them. So a couple of times the net sort of draws quite near to Dracula, so he's potentially under threat of being revealed, or there's kind of this threat to him. So you kind of have that element. And then the Van Helsing character is drawn in as well. So that they again have this, quite clunky device, which pays off in a way later because of the twist, but even so, I think this is an episode where once again it's being trying to be way too smart with the twist, and it sort of feels like twists for the sake of twists, really. So the opening scene is like Dracula playing chess with Sister Van Helsing, or Agatha/Van Helsing, and so you wonder what's going on here. They're like mortal enemies, and they're playing chess, they're drinking, and it's used as a device to sort of him telling the story of what happened on the boat, sort of thing. So at certain points it'll flash back to them, and he'll be, kind of doing his comedy stick, if you like, trying to justify his actions, and she's like questioning those actions. And the big reveal is that he's used his sort of powers to like transport her to the boat, and that's how we've got to this stage from where we were from the last episode. So what he's basically done is that he's framed her for the murders of the passengers so far, and she's obviously then has to try and convince them no, she's been framed, he's a vampire, and all that sort of thing. So the second half of the episode is very much the Van Helsing sort of Dracula show, if you like. I think unlike the first episode, you don't get really any moments of satisfying horror. I think there were 1 or 2, maybe 3 moments in that opening episode where there was a bit of suspense and you had some like exciting horror moments. You really don't get that in this episode. It opened quite promisingly, because when they first go on the ship, one of the passengers, he kind of has this really trippy sort of dream, which obviously it's Dracula causing this, but you've got like this cap. He's like the captain of the ship, and then you have this chef character, and the chef, he doesn't have a hand, and he wanders in, and you've got this great line, "Hey, have you seen my hand, captain?" And it's repeated over and over again, and it's obviously part of this sort of weird little dream, and that's a good moment. That sort of set up, they might be doing something quite sort of interesting and sinister here, but they never really build on it. And the problem with this episode is then it's almost like after the first one where it was so absurd and so silly, but at least that gave me something to talk about, or at least it sort of hinted that they were trying to do something interesting with it. I think this one they play it a lot more straight, and they play it almost like it kind of goes like period sort of drama, but with obviously the Dracula elements. But because he's still doing the goofy like comedy and the kind of, and you're still getting the OTT hammy acting and line delivery, then it kind of doesn't work either way. I mean, you get a collection of characters on this ship, and they just talk in very stereotypical way. They're very flat characters. There's not much interesting about them. Again, you get really, really bad accents, and not bad in a good way, not bad in an entertaining way, just really kind of grating to listen to. It's just cranked up to such a level, and the scenes tend to drag on. There's a lot of rambling on, a lot of plot exposition, a lot of kind of banter back and forth, but not, as I said, not really in a good way. Again, it does go OTT with the comedy, and for this episode to really work, I needed to sort of care about the characters on the ship, and I never really did. And the other problem is, since the first episode, the trick is sort of out the bag in a way with Dracula. So in the first episode, there's quite a surprising scene where he takes on like human form, and so then he, like in the first episode, they thought it was Johnny or Jonathan, and Dracula took his form, and then that's the twist. And when it first happens, they sort of do fool you. It's sort of a nice little surprise. But when it gets to this stage, you kind of know Dracula has that power, and it, like most things in this Dracula, it's very telegraphed. So I mean, that happens. There's a scene with one of the crew when Dracula appears in the form of the girl, and like she's seducing one of the other crew, and then obviously it's Dracula and he kills him, and you just know it's going to happen now. It's just predictable from a mile off. And I think there's just a lot of plot contrivances in this one, just a lot of like convenient ways for Dracula to somehow get to the other crew members, because that's kind of the deal. We need it to move the plot forward for Dracula to run through his little beats. So at one point he he seduces like this young sort of bride who's, her and her fiance are on board, and there's just nothing convincing about him. I mean, I know this is meant to be this new, sexy, wild sort of drag, but there's just nothing charming about him, and there's nothing that convincing than these people would be taken into him, and it does revert to then you just have to take it on red. Then he's like manipulating them or seducing them, or then it's just part of his sort of magic powers. He can manipulate the mind. So you just get these convenient sort of plot contrivances where he, at one point, because there's like this sort of rich business guy, young guy, assumably born into money, and I mean, I'm not surprised this guy turns out to be a dick, because I sort of saw that one coming, because he kind of has that to him, I think. But he kind of makes a deal with Dracula at one point. Why the hell would you make a deal with Dracula? Really, it's just makes this guy look so dumb, and so they trick this father and this daughter, and of course, no surprise, once Dracula the daughter sort of kills herself, to make it quick sort of thing, and then the father is killed, but he's shot by the other guy in like a struggle, but then surprise surprise, Dracula turns on him, and there's this scene late in the episode, which again isn't a bad idea. They play on the whole slavery angle. So Sister Agatha obviously has convinced them who Dracula is and that she's on their side. So that they sort of get in this circle, which again Dracula can't enter, and it's all on deck. And so there's this one like Asian guy, or Jamaican, sorry, I think, some African descent anyway. And Dracula sort of plays on that history. He kind of says, I'll sure stay in the circle, be the slave. And it's, to do that is quite an interesting idea, because it's like the context of the time. But even so, the fact that he actually goads this guy out of walking out of the circle is just so absurd, because the guy knows that he's safe in the circle, but he's not going to be safe outside of it. And it's partly his, I guess, ego, the fact that he thinks he can kill Dracula, and Dracula plays with him. He lets him shoot him 3 times, and of course it doesn't kill him, and then he kills the guy. But stuff like that is just so weak, just so contrived. And then you get this drawn out end of the episode where they sort of think they've killed Dracula. Van Helsing has like burned him sort of thing, and he's gone overboard, and then a week passes, so she's very cautious. She's not willing to take anything for granted, and she insists, and they sort of leave no trace of the ship, just in case he is still out there. And really, they can't on the new land, because they're going to England, the new sort of England. But then we get this drawn out scene where it's revealed he's still around, he's on board, he kills the captain, or he nearly kills. He's like kind of in the undead sort of phase. So you get this drawn out sort of sequence where Van Helsing tries to distract Dracula, so the captain can then, recover and try and kill him. And the boat sinks, it goes up in flames, and we sort of think that Van Helsing might have died, really, but then Dracula appears in a coffin at the bottom of the sea, and he rises up and he goes onto the land. So we're now in England, and then it literally ends with Van Helsing, but in England, and she says, "Welcome to England, Count Dracula." So she seems to have some sort of other identity. Maybe it's not Van Helsing, we're gonna find out. I mean, I don't know what happened to Mila in this episode, whether she's gonna reappear or not. I thought having her involved made a bit more sense, but she wasn't in this episode. We'll see if she comes back for the final one. But yeah, again, really not very good. Again, it dragged. Again, it was, overlong. It's not doing much for me, folks, I'm afraid. But I'll stay the distance. I'll be back tomorrow at some point with the episode of the third the review, of the third and final episode. Also, up tomorrow at some point, maybe early the next day, you can expect my review. Sorry, not my review, part 1 of my top 50 sci-fi movies. So, part 1, which will be the first 10 movies, it'll be up very soon. So thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts of Dracula episode 2 in the comments below. I'll see you guys again soon. Goodbye.